What is up, everybody? This is Mycophilia Sage checking in here today. I hope you guys are doing fantastic. I know I am, because today is finally the day where I crack open this fine vintage from October 31st of Truffles. And so if you guys remember, this is the same genetics that I had in that truffle harvesting shoebox video that I posted on Christmas. And so that video was around like 3 weeks ago or so. So, I wanted to do this sooner, but anyways, because I wanted to compare the yield to show you guys the difference between spawning truffles to bulk and just keeping them in vitro, aka inside a jar or inside a grain bag. But now the comparison's able to be done. Now I'll tell you from straight up, the bulk will have a bigger yield than this. I just want to know the difference, right? So I would be happy if I could get half of that yield in this jar. And what I'm going to do after I harvest these guys is show you how you can take the grains, right, that are left over and spawn them to a shoebox and get more truffles and some fruits. All right, so what do we need for that? Shoebox. Le coco de coeur. Harvesting plate. So here's how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take the truffle jar with the grains and I'm gonna shake them up and pour them all over the shoebox, okay? And then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go through the grains and pick out the truffles that I find. I'm just gonna wipe it off, clean it off, and then I'm gonna put the truffles inside here. Sounds pretty simple, huh? And then once I go through all the truffles, then I'm gonna add the cocoa core in here and then just mix it up. Super simple and super easy. Now, if I do miss some truffles, which is very possible because there's probably some very small ones in there, that's actually quite a lot of grains, quite a lot of volume, quite heavy, I gotta say, which is a very, very good thing. So, I probably will miss some, but what is gonna happen? Well, they're gonna have no problem once I put cocoa in there. They're just gonna get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they'll start producing more truffles on their own, so it doesn't matter. So it's a win-win situation. This is why I love truffle producers. All right, guys, let's get this show on the road. So look at this, everybody. Look at what I've come. I'm getting close to the bottom and I found this gooey huge thing. And I was like, oh, is this a big piece of agar?
And I realized, no, this is the bottom of the jar.
And if you guys remember, the bottom of the jar of this was just like full of metabolites, basically, because with truffle producers, it's very, very normal to get metabolites. They do it when they're healthy all the time. And so I guess this is like a big layer of metabolites on the bottom that's sort of gelled up. And it's sort of like become almost like a truffle of its own. So you can see there's actual truffles in there as well, although very shallow. So I think I'm gonna just continue to uncover them slowly as I've been doing. These guys are basically like the straight grain jars. The truffles, as you can see, is quite a bit smaller, looks a lot more shallower, and there's a lot more undigested grain, which makes sense because although there was some undigested grain, and by undigested grain, I mean like basically grains that still like sort of half grain inside the truffle. Like half of it would be truffle and the other half, the top half would be sort of jutting out and still like mostly grain. For example, using the BRF cakes, when I did truffles with BRF cakes, right, it wasn't as bad as this. It was closer to the way that it was with core. Core, it was like true potatoes, right? Whereas this thing, it's more like with the straight grain jars, it's more like just a layer on the outside and then it's very shallow. And to get to this point, I had to uncover a lot of grains and pull out a bunch of grains that were undigested. So with the BRF cakes, it was more like the potatoes that you get doing it in core or like a bulk substrate. And that makes sense because it's a lot less concentrated, right? There's not as many grains in one spot. So you got some core, and so there's no like grains getting stuck in there and all that. And obviously it doesn't digest the core, it doesn't eat the core like it does the grains, because core does not have nutrition. It just takes the moisture from the core. So yeah, definitely a lot less in terms of yield, almost at the bottom of the jar, and this is all I got. Nothing big and thick and, you know, truffle like really. So far, we've talked about one difference between truffles grown in bulk and truffles grown in vitro, that being the size of the truffles being a lot bigger with bulk versus in vitro. But another major difference is that the harvesting is also a lot different, in the sense that when grown in vitro, you will get pieces that look like big truffles, right? So you start digging in, you start trying to take a piece of grain here and there, and you think, oh, you know, in the center of this big mass, there has to be like the solid, digested, fully ready truffle. Well, a lot of times you find that you keep digging and digging and digging a big chunk, and then all you're left with ultimately is just one piece of grain and maybe like a millimeter of truffle. And I find that happens a lot with the grains versus with the bulk substrate, where basically all of them are fully formed. Like, this doesn't happen with the bulk. You rarely get embedded grains, and if they are embedded grains, they're pretty much on the surface of the truffle, and the truffle is basically fully made. You'll get way better yield just using bulk. I recommend just cocoa core. Do not use any nutritious substrates if you want to do it for truffles, because they'll eventually contaminate. They'll contaminate way faster than non-nutritious substrates. And with non-nutritious substrates, because of that, you can keep going for months and get flushes and flushes of truffles. I also wouldn't recommend eating truffles grown on poop for obvious reasons. And also, if you guys would like to learn more about how to produce truffles, the types of techs they are, what you can do to maximize your truffle production and all. And I got a bunch of videos on truffle producers on my channel. Just check out the playlist Sclerotia bracket truffle videos. I will put the quick link at the end of this video. Well, seems like we got all of it. Alright guys, so here is the total amount. Now, I haven't measured it yet. I will measure it in the end of the video and let you guys know how many grams this came out to. But first, I need to spawn all the rest of the grains with the cocoa core. So I will get on that right now. So guys, I actually forgot to turn on the camera while I was making up the substrate, but as you can see, it's a lot thinner than usual core lovers, and that's because these guys don't need much to fruit properly, because they're really, really small. So they don't take up all that much water. So it's actually better to have less. It'll help aid in the colonization speed and all that. And hopefully it'll also discourage truffle production and hopefully encourage fruit production. So I'm gonna basically set this up and I'll be back. Alright guys, so I put the top layer here and we should be good to go. Now let's measure this baby up. So I have measured it, and drum rolls, it came out to 64.23 grams. That is a pretty far cry from 274 grams from the shoebox, from the same amount of spawn, the same plate genetics. So in our little experiment here with similar genetics from the same plate is that we increased our yield by 4 times by putting it to bulk. So ultimately, if you're doing truffles, I know some of you guys are, then I recommend going straight to bulk and let them produce truffles and or fruits. You know, they're very chill. You could harvest them after you take a bunch of truffles out of there and then put it back and they'll recolonize and make more truffles. Or you could do that after fruiting. You know, it doesn't matter. They're very, very hardy. And you know, I was going to end the video there, but I actually took some footage of me harvesting another truffle jar from different genetics. This actually had quite a bit less grain than the last jar, so I wanted to show you guys sort of a comparison in yield. So these guys actually ended up yielding 93.45 grams. So that's quite a bit more than the last one. That's equivalent to about 180 plus grams of fresh core lovers. So, you know, genetics also most certainly do play a role. Alright guys, thank you for watching. I also do private one-on-one tutoring if you guys would like to level up your cultivation game, or you're just getting in and you want to have a fast track to successful cultivation. I also do that, and I also got my Patreon, and I got my affiliate links, and all the things that you could support me by is in the description. Thank you for all your support. Hope you guys have a great day or night. mycophilia.official, checking out.